I was standing in the hallway of my own home when I heard my husband say, "She doesn't need to know the details. By the time she figures it out, the transfer will already be done." I had let myself in through the back door the way I always did. The key, the little push to unstick the frame 3 steps down the hall. I had done it 1,000 times, but this time I stopped. He was on speakerphone. I could hear another voice through the kitchen wall, lower and flatter. "Norman, she's going to notice eventually." "Not if we move fast," my husband said. "The payout clears in 72 hours, that's plenty of time." The payout, $3.1 million. My name on every page of the documentation. 37 years managing the books at Caldwell Manufacturing, and a buyout package that had taken 8 months of negotiation to finalize. I had driven straight from my attorney's office. I had cried a little in the parking garage. The good kind of crying, the kind where you finally let something out that you've been holding for longer than you realized, the kind that means it's over and it's real and you made it. I pressed my back against the hallway wall and held the folder against my chest. The other voice said something I couldn't fully make out. Then Norman again. "Damon's already set up the receiving account. Lyle just needs my confirmation by Thursday. If she signs the reallocation form tonight, it's done before the weekend." Damon, my son's name in that sentence landed somewhere below my ribs. I stood there for another moment, then I stepped back. One foot, then the other. I let myself out the back door the same way I had come in and stood on the porch in the afternoon sun. My hands were shaking, but I did not cry. I sat in my car for 45 minutes. I did not go back inside. I called my financial advisor first. Mr. Holloway picked up on the second ring. "Congratulations," he said. "Today was a big day." "I need to ask you something," I said. My voice was steadier than I expected. "The disbursement, can it be redirected before it clears? Into an account that only I can access, not the joint account, mine alone." A pause. "Is everything all right?" I told him what I had heard, all of it. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, the line was quiet. "Don't sign anything tonight," he said. "Not one form, not one piece of paper, no matter how it's explained to you. I can rewrite the funds to a protected account under your name only. No joint access, but I need your authorization before the 72-hour window opens." "Do it," I said. "I'll need 30 minutes. "You have 20. He had it done in 18. Then I got out of the car, walked around to the front of the house, and rang my own doorbell. Norman looked surprised when he opened the door. He hadn't been expecting me until 4. "You're home early," he said. He smiled, but it was the kind of smile that takes half a second too long to find its way to the face. I finished sooner than I thought. I held up the folder. His eyes went to it immediately, just a flash of something before his expression smoothed over. "That's wonderful," he said. "Come on in, I'll make coffee." I watched him move toward the kitchen. His steps were a little too quick, his voice a little too easy. I had been married to this man for 34 years. I knew the difference between relaxed and performing relaxed. We sat at the kitchen table and talked about ordinary things. Dinner, the gutters, whether the weather would hold through the weekend. He was waiting for me to bring up the money. I could feel him waiting. Finally he said, "So the full amount cleared?" "It will in 72 hours, I said. He nodded. Good. A careful pause. "I was actually talking to Lyle recently. You remember Lyle Brennan from Rotary. He mentioned a structured reallocation that could help us maximize the return instead of just letting it sit in a low-yield account. I thought maybe tonight we could take a look." "Sure," I said pleasantly. "Let's take a look." Damon came by that evening. He lived 40 minutes away in the city and didn't usually come on weeknights. He walked in with takeout bags and a smile that was slightly too bright, the way it used to be when he was 12, and had broken something and was hoping the peace offering would change the temperature of the room. "Congrats, Mom," he said and hugged me. 37 years, that's something. We ate at the kitchen table, the 3 of us. Norman talked about Lyle's opportunity the way you talk about something you've already decided. Not asking, just explaining. Damon filled in details at the right moments, a little too smoothly. I listened and nodded and asked the kind of questions that sound like confusion but aren't. After dinner, Norman brought out a folder. "This is just the reallocation authorization," he said. "Standard paperwork. It redirects the funds into a consolidated account while Lyle structures the investment. One signature." I picked up the document and read it carefully. It was not standard, and it was not simple. It was a full transfer of disbursement rights. My name was the signatory. The receiving account was not mine. I set it down. Why isn't my name on the receiving account? I asked. Norman blinked. It's just how the structure works. The funds pass through Lyle's umbrella entity and come back to us with the gains. Come back to us, I repeated. That's right. I looked at Damon, he looked at the table. Damon, I said quietly, is Lyle Brennan the same person who put money into your food truck business? A pause, yes. How much does his investment company say you owe them? Another pause. It's complicated. I folded the document in half, then let's uncomplicate it. What came out over the next hour was not what I had expected. Norman had gone to Lyle 2 years ago, not because Damon had asked him to, because Damon's business was struggling and Norman, who had been home for 5 years, who had watched his son's dreams slowly fall apart, who had always believed that money applied in time could fix most things, had decided to solve it, quietly, without telling me. Lyle had put in $650,000 under the agreement that Norman would personally guarantee the return. Now Lyle had decided the business wasn't going to recover, and he wanted his money back with interest by October, and somehow, in the architecture of Norman's thinking, the solution to all of that was my retirement. You promised him my money, I said. I promised a guarantee, Norman said. Backed by what assets exactly? He didn't answer. Damon stood up from the table, his face had gone pale. Dad, you told me this was a refinancing deal. You said you had savings set aside. I was going to have savings, Norman said. From my retirement, I said. The kitchen was very quiet, the refrigerator hummed. Outside, something moved in the yard. Damon turned and looked at me, his eyes were red at the corners. Not from crying, from something harder. Mom, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know what he was planning to use. I studied my son's face for a long time. I believed him. That made it more complicated, not less. A son who had been used as a reason without his knowledge, that was its own particular kind of wound. I know, I said gently. Norman pushed back from the table. This is still fixable, if you sign the form. The money is already moved, I said. The room shifted. What? Norman said. I called Mr. Holloway this afternoon. Before I came back inside, the funds are in a protected account under my name only, no joint access, nothing you or Lyle or anyone else can reach without my personal authorization and a legal review. Norman stared at me. You heard us. I came home through the back door. That night I didn't sleep well. I lay in the dark and replayed the afternoon, Norman's voice through the wall, the way Lyle's name had dropped so easily into the conversation, the way my son's name had been used like a line item. I thought about 37 years of early mornings and late nights, and the particular kind of tired that comes not from the work itself, but from carrying it alone while trying to make it look effortless. I thought about what it means to come home with good news and find out the people waiting for you had been counting it before it arrived. I was not angry in the way I expected to be. I was something quieter than angry, something that sat in the chest like cold water. 2 days later, Lyle Brennan came to the front door. He was not loud. He was a man in his early 60s in a pressed jacket with very still eyes, and he came with someone I didn't recognize, younger, holding a briefcase, and he said pleasantly that he just wanted to talk. I stood in the doorway and did not invite him in. I understand there's been some confusion about the timeline, he said. There's no confusion, I said. My husband made commitments he had no authority to make. I won't be honoring them. Something shifted in his expression, just barely. He provided a personal guarantee. That's a binding commitment. A personal guarantee backed by assets he doesn't own, I said. I'd suggest your attorney verify that before characterizing it as binding. The younger man murmured something. Lyle nodded once. I'd hate for this to become contentious, he said. Then I'd suggest you leave, I said, and I closed the door. My heart was going so fast I could feel it in my throat, but my hands were flat and steady against the door, and I breathed until the hammering slowed. Then I called Ms. Pruitt. She arrived the next morning, sharp woman, economical with words, the kind of attorney who takes notes and says less than she knows. She sat at the kitchen table while Norman sat across from us looking like a man at a hearing he hadn't prepared for. Tell me everything, she said. He did. It took a long time. The part I wasn't prepared for came near the end. Norman had been watching Damon's business fail for nearly a year and a half before we went to Lyle. He had watched it happen and said nothing to me, not because he was trying to deceive me then, but because he was certain he could fix it before I needed to know. He had always operated that way. Decide, act, report back with a resolution already in hand. He thought that was protecting me. He had thought that for 34 years. I was afraid, he said, not quite looking at me, that if I told you, you'd say Damon needed to close it down, cut his losses. And you thought that was wrong. I thought it was giving up on him. A long pause. My father quit everything he ever started, every job, every project, every promise. I swore I would never let Damon feel what that felt like. I had known about Norman's father in the broad way that married people know the outlines of each other's histories. But I had not known, until that moment, that the fear had been running this deep for this long, that it had been the thing underneath everything else. So you were going to use $3.1 million of my retirement, I said slowly, to protect our son from feeling like his grandfather. He didn't answer, but he closed his eyes, and that was answer enough. Damon was in the living room. He had come over early when I called him. He had heard most of what his father said through the open door. I watched him absorb it, watched him take in this history he hadn't been shown, this fear his father had been carrying like a stone for 30 years and pressing into decisions without naming it. He walked to the kitchen doorway and stood there. He looked at his father. Dad. His voice was quiet. I need to say something, a pause. The business was failing before Lyle came in. I knew it was over. I kept it going because I didn't know how to tell you I was going to close it without feeling like I'd let you down. He swallowed. I didn't need you to fix it. I just needed you to let me end it without making it mean something it didn't mean. Norman looked at his son. I didn't know how to do that, he said. I know, Damon said, but this wasn't the answer. Miss Pruitt laid it out cleanly. A personal guarantee against assets Norman didn't own was not a sound legal claim. Lyle could pursue litigation, but the facts of the arrangement, the informality of it, the lack of documentation tying it to my assets, the absence of my consent, made that a difficult case to build. The more important question was whether Lyle would decide the expense of chasing it outweighed writing off the loss. How well do you know this man? She asked Norman. Well enough, he said. He doesn't like losing, but he's not irrational. Then let's make the math clear, she said. She sent a letter to Lyle's attorney by the end of the day. By the following week they had called back. The conversation shifted. The inflated demand dropped. What remained was the actual number, Damon's actual debt, minus the interest Lyle had added on the assumption of leverage he didn't have. It was not a small number, but it was a real one Damon could look at directly. He closed the food truck business at the end of the month. He handled it himself. Called the suppliers, settled the accounts, returned the equipment, signed the papers. 4 days of difficult phone calls and a lot of quiet in between. When he called me on the last evening, he sounded tired in a particular way, like a person who has just set something heavy down. It's done, he said. How do you feel? He was quiet for a moment, like I can breathe again. Is that strange? No, I said. That's exactly right. Norman and I sat at the kitchen table a week later without any agenda. Just the two of us, coffee going cold, the late afternoon light coming through the window at a low angle. I asked him when he had stopped telling me things. He thought about it seriously before answering. After your mother died, he said, you handled everything, the estate, your sister, all of it, and you never came apart, and somewhere in there I think I started believing that you didn't need me beside you while things were hard, that you just needed the results. I hadn't expected that. I didn't need you to handle it for me, I said. I needed you in the room while I was handling it. I understand that now. You should have understood it then. Yes, he said, I should have. We sat with that for a while. Outside, a car moved slowly past the street. The light shifted. I'm not restoring joint access to the accounts, I said. Not yet, maybe not for a long time. He looked at me steadily. I understand. I'm not leaving, I said. But what you almost did, it was not a mistake you stumbled into. It was a decision you made and remade over months. Trust doesn't come back from that in one conversation. I know. Norman. I waited until he was looking directly at me. You are not your father. You have never been your father. But what you were planning would have made you something worse than him. He walked away from things. You were going to take something. There's a difference. That landed. I watched it land and I didn't soften it. He needed to feel the full weight of it. People who love each other sometimes need that. I know, he said, but this time the words carried something different in them. The following week I made 2 calls. The first was to Mr. Holloway. I asked him to set aside a portion of the settlement, not for investments, not for any debt, not for anyone's future but mine, a fund for things I had always put off. The only rule was that it could not be used for anything practical. The second call was to my college roommate, Celeste, who had been living on the coast of Maine since her husband passed and whom I had been meaning to visit for 6 years, always finding a reason to wait. "I'm coming in October," I told her, "for 2 weeks." She was quiet for a moment, then she said, "It's about time." That was the honest answer. Norman didn't argue when I told him at dinner. He didn't ask what it would cost or whether I should wait until things settled. He just said, "You should go. You've earned it." I looked at him across the table. The man I had built 34 years with, the man who had made a terrible decision out of a fear he had never said out loud, the man who was now, slowly and without much ceremony, trying to be different. Trust doesn't come back all at once, I knew that. I had told him as much, but it has to start from something. The morning I packed for Maine, I stood in the front hallway for a moment. The same hallway where I had stood several weeks before, pressing a folder against my chest, hearing my own name used like a problem to be solved. The same house I had paid for, the same roof I had fixed twice, the same kitchen where ordinary evenings had happened for more than 3 decades. I thought about what it feels like to come home with something good and discover that the people waiting for you had already decided what it was worth. I thought about walking back out the door and sitting in my car and calling Mr. Holloway before I went back inside, about standing on my own porch and closing the door in Lyle Brennan's face without raising my voice, about sitting across from Miss Pruitt and making decisions, about the night I told my son the truth and let him make his own. None of it had required me to be cruel, none of it had required me to be loud. Norman brought my travel mug to the hallway and held it out. "Drive safe," he said. "I will." I walked out to my car. The air was cool and smelled like the beginning of something. I backed out slowly, and for just a moment I looked at the house. My house, the door I had closed quietly and come back to through the front, the window through which I had heard a conversation that changed everything. And then I turned onto the street and drove. Because here is what I know now, after 63 years, 37 of them spent working, and 1 very long month that I will carry with me for the rest of my life. You do not have to be loud to have authority. You do not have to perform strength for it to be real, and the most important thing you will ever protect is not the money, not the house, not even the relationship. It is your own judgment, the knowledge that you can read a room, read a document, read the face of someone who is trying to manage you instead of love you and act accordingly. No one can transfer that without your signature. And I have gotten very careful about what I sign.